5 Republican states sue the Biden administration over revisions Biden made to the Title IX rule, a set of guidelines intended to prevent sex-based discrimination and harassment in government-funded schools. Texas Governor Greg Abbott led the way, directing the Texas Education Agency Monday to ignore Biden's new rules. In a letter to Biden, Abbott blasted the expansion, writing, quote, "You have rewritten Title IX to force schools to treat boys as if they are girls and to accept every student's self-declared gender identity."
Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton sued the Biden administration on Monday to block the expansion of the rules, which, among other things, are meant to stop bathroom bans for transgender students and teachers, as well as requirement of using preferred pronouns. Now, 4 other Republican-led states, Louisiana, Mississippi, Montana, and Idaho, have also joined in on Abbott's defiance, filing lawsuits against the Biden administration to block the new rules. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis staked his position on the matter last week. Let's listen.
Florida rejects Joe Biden's attempt to rewrite Title IX. We will not comply, and we will fight back. We are not going to let Joe Biden try to inject men into women's activities. We are not going to let Joe Biden undermine the rights of parents, and we are not going to let Joe Biden abuse his constitutional authority to try to impose these policies on us here in Florida. We stand with opportunities. We are not going to let Biden get away with it. We will not comply.
The latest action from red states condemning these rules sets up further legal fights over LGBTQ plus student protections. The revisions are set to take effect on August 1st. So this has been an issue for years and years and years now. And part of the problem is, so Title IX is a federal law that was passed in the 1970s, originally to make sure that basically that schools couldn't, if you had a team or a social club for boys, and there was equivalent interest in having one for girls.
You can't discriminate against women.
The schools had to do that too. They had to create an additional club for that.
And
it states, the literal text of the statute is, no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under an education program receiving federal financial assistance. That statute has not been changed or updated or modified in any way since the 1970s. So the question is, and the skepticism that, frankly, not just a lot of people on the right, but I think even a lot of due process or free speech organizations have, is that even if you think, some kind of federal law to protect transgender kids or making the bathroom accommodations, those kinds of things for them, was this law ever intended to cover that? Clearly not. And can the statute be read in such a way that these protections can be created out of it? Because this is no lawmaker, no Congress looking at this. These are just bureaucrats, and it changes from every administration saying this is how we interpret this law, which then invites itself to challenge because I think it obviously was never meant to cover that.
All right. Legally, Title IX has been interpreted a lot of ways that I think are very much socially acceptable and understood these days, because it was initially read by some people who didn't want to have a more expansive read of whose rights matter and whose rights get protected in the United States of America, wanted it to be as limited as possible, wanted it to be, you literally get a soccer team if the boys have a soccer team, and that's the end of all of it. Now, after decades of experience with the law and decades of litigation, it has been more broadly understood to, for instance, weigh in on questions about whether or not, let's say, a husband of a woman gets certain kind of healthcare benefits and the like that are attached to maternity, for example, whether or not the basis of sex is understandably broad, and when laws are written, they are very frequently read more broadly because of the difficulty of actually advancing legislation. You see this a lot with Second Amendment rights, where the Constitution certainly doesn't say you have a right to have a Uzi in your garage, but Second Amendment advocates read it that way. So this isn't really a textual question. This is an ethical question about what kind of society we want to live in. The Trump administration really narrowed how they were defining what the colleges had to provide to get federal money, and the Biden administration undid those rules. And the key takeaway of this is to say that Title IX also applies to LGBTQ people, that on the basis of sex, you can't discriminate against a man for choosing to engage in what are considered to be women's activities or dressing like a woman or doing anything else or vice versa. That is a kind of sex discrimination. And if people don't want to do that, they can ignore these rules and people can be discriminated against at those colleges, and we can have a broader conversation about whether or not colleges across the country should also be ignoring rules, say, to protect Jewish kids on campus because of allegations of rising anti-Semitism or anything else. But I do think that with the huge problems that are going on in the country, it is very telling that conservatives are focused on the idea of policing how much respect or protection a college should give to trans kids on college campuses.
Well, the other component
or
of Title IX guidance,
kids on college campuses.
the other component of Title IX guidance is that it required under the Obama administration and again under the Biden administration, they interpreted, again, those 20 words I just read you to mean that on college campuses there must be an entire judicial system operating under totally different rules from the normal criminal justice system in order to investigate and punish allegations of sexual harassment and sexual misconduct under standards that, again, many organizations, including the ACLU, had problems with, using a preponderance of the evidence standard, not allowing students access to the charges against them, not allowing them to have a right to scrutinize the people making the allegations, not including right to have an attorney present, all of those things. Again, that was read under this statute, which clearly doesn't, I think it is you say it's not a textual issue, but I think it is clearly straining the literal text to say that it creates this kind of this kind of regime on college campuses is already required under existing law,
Yeah, look,
and we at administrative
they're
agencies
going to
can
ignore
say that
it.
without,
Great. They're going to ignore it.
Well, yeah, they should ignore it. And the point
Okay.
being, if you want changes to these policies, you need to actually pass a new law. You actually had to do some legislating.
No, they won't do that. So
Well, if they can't do it because it's politically unpopular, then that's a win for democracy.
I don't think that's quite true. But I do think what's happening is that you're gonna have there is I think a lot of the country is polarized over the question of how much protection your gay child should get when they go to college. It's crazy to say that, but there's been a conservative effort to say that you should object to a rule that says colleges should consider discrimination.
Gay is not
to
sex
include,
or gender, that's sexuality.
That's literally, the 1972 law didn't expressly protect gay people. Title IX, one of the things that have been read into Title IX, so offensively, is that gay people are also deserving of protection on the basis of
I'm not saying
sex.
they're not deserving of protection. I'm saying that the statute doesn't protect
Right,
them.
and
It was
there
about
isn't a
protecting
statute.
women's sports teams.
There isn't a statute that protects them. So you believe that people should read in that there is nothing protecting gay kids from
Protecting them
sexual
in what
discrimination, from discrimination on the basis of being gay.
Right. I think nobody should be discriminated against, period.
Yeah,
But
I wish and hope on rainbows in the world too, but the reality is we live in a world where people are discriminated on the basis.
Well, the
of being
objection
gay.
is that these rules and these interpretations, conservatives would argue, are being used to discriminate against women, sex-specific organizations
but
and
the
teams
Biden
where
rule actually specifically went out of its way to avoid women's sports issues. So this isn't even about that.
Right, which I find suspect. They said, okay,
How is
under
that
this
suspect?
existing.
You're mad if he does it. He's mad if he doesn't do it.
I'm mad they're just making up this law to be like, it's just a vibes-based interpretation that, well, it does require biologically female people
It's
or
not a
male
law,
people
first of all,
to
it's
go
guidance.
into the female
It's how
to
the
be able
Biden
to use the female
administration-
sports
it's
facilities, but
not
not
a
be
law.
on the team, and that's how we're just making up what these 20
It's
words
not a
mean.
law. It's
What's
guidance,
a law?
and every. No, it's not.
Right,
It's
what they're implementing is guidance.
right.
Yeah.
It's every administration comes in and offers their guidance. So if you want the guidance to be different, vote for a different candidate who does not believe that LGBTQ rights should be read into Title IX and that colleges that receive federal funding have an obligation to protect those rights. That's what you can do. If that is what's motivating your vote, you can do that. If you are LGBTQ or have an LGBTQ brother or loved one and feel differently about it, you can vote differently. I think that we're in a world where we're making all of these weird legalistic technical arguments about, well, is this free speech or is this not free speech, or does the law allow this or does it not allow this? And we have no kind of moral conversation about whether or not the things that we're fighting for are right and just and good. And so I don't, like, if you don't want to follow, if the university doesn't want to follow Title IX, that's fine. I'm making an argument that, of course, it is beneficial for everybody at campuses to feel safe, and to be safe, not like an abstract safety issue. I'm talking about
we're talking
the
a lot
reams-
how
wait,
abstract
no,
safety concerns
so that's
are
why I
going
corrected
awry.
myself, because I knew you were going to be all over the case. So let's talk specifically about the number of rapes that happened to girls on college campuses that motivated some of the moves that are happening here in Title IX. It is absolutely true that there has been some overreach and some people have been swept up in a system that does not have adequate due process.
Sure.
But I don't want to miss the ball on the reality that there are people, there are not, cis women swimmers getting beat up in the locker room. That has never happened at any of the universities where this has been a debate. But all around this country, trans women are subjected to disproportionate violence in these kinds of private spaces because they're forced into spaces neither of which they're perceived to be belonging, right? Regardless of what door, what bathroom they're pushed
Trans women
into.
suffer
So
a lot of violence on college campuses?
In the country, yes. Are you not aware of the violence statistics of
yes.
trans women?
Well, but
yeah, so that's
because
why that is why these
engaged
policies.
in risky, drug related and prostitution related, which doesn't. That's not a moral judgment. They absolutely deserve more protection, but it's not elite trans college students facing an extreme amount of violence.
8 days ago,
as far as I
trans
can
men
tell.
were attacked by a man shouting transphobic slurs at a Sacramento bar. These are not sex workers. These are not people engaged in dangerous activities. 8 days ago, 4 trans people were
the danger
attacked
to
in a
them is not on
Sacramento
college
bar.
campuses.
It's both. It's everywhere. So if you look, you made your position clear. I don't really feel like arguing at it. God bless the people of Texas for making this decision. They can ignore the federal mandate.
But you said it's
they
not
might
moral.
they might lose federal money, just like other students might ignore this new Columbia Act, which is intended to set up anti-Semitism monitors if they have federal money withdrawn from those universities if they don't comply with having anti-Semitism monitors on campus. And these colleges can make these decisions. People can disagree about it. I personally think it's a good thing to protect all students, including young men, from being railroaded in these in a kind of due process-less trial. But I'm not going to sit here and not say that the underlying value of recognizing that of all of the ways people get discriminated against. In the 70s, they weren't thinking about gay people like that. They were thinking just about women. Now we have a better understanding of all of the ways that discrimination happens. Well, why wouldn't you want to protect LGBT kids on the same basis that you protect young women?
I'm not saying I don't want them. I certainly want them protected. I want everyone protected from violence. But
All
what
right.
happens if
nothing's
a
forcing them
female
to.
student has to share locker accommodations with a trans person and says this is sexual or gender-based discrimination against me because this makes me uncomfortable? Is that not covered under Title IX? I'm saying these things are an obvious tension.
It's almost like we live in a society.
Well, we are working out.
Almost like we live
They're
in a
saying the
society.
interpretation of this rule has been strained beyond
Look,
all belief.
Robby, what if a white person has to sit next to a black person in the restaurant and they feel like that infringes on their freedoms because now we segregated the country? It's a bummer. So at a certain point, it becomes a moral question. Do we think that the white person has a right to go to a segregated restaurant and not have to sit next to a black person on a bus?
No, we don't.
At one point, most of the country did, and it was the law of the land. And then people started agitating and advocating for a different way of looking at the world, and those people won out. So we'll see what happens with this trans debate.
But most people think that
the kids are usually not wrong, and
black and white people are not different in the same way men and women are different on a biological level, and there's some protections and separate accommodations for them.
I've got some news for you about how people thought about the world.
I'm not saying, but that was wrong. I don't. You might think that's wrong when applied to men and women. I don't, and most people don't. But I guess time will tell. I think there is okay to be some separate grouping and organization
Robby,
and legal, which is what Title IX was about in the first place.
You keep trying to make
creating
this
separate
about
accommodations.
women in locker rooms when this specifically is not about trans women in sports. Joe Biden went out of his
locker
way.
rooms, yes.
Wait, Joe Biden went out of his way
absolutely
to make this not about trans women in sports.
It's not about the sports. It's about the locker rooms.
So first
right,
of
because
all,
they made that distinction. I'm saying it's arbitrary and can't be read into the statute in any way. So that's the argument.
I don't.
All right, we've gone back and forth enough on that.
I don't care.
Tell us what you
Congratulations, Texas. Do not protect LGBTQ people at colleges, universities. You won this fight. Stay around. More Rising after this.